Act 1. The Reluctant Architect of War. In the dim glow of a Tokyo naval headquarters in the autumn of 1941, a solitary figure stood before a map of the Pacific, his fingers tracing the vast blue expanse that separated Japan from its greatest enemy. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, Commander-in-Chief of the Combined Fleet, stared at the pins marking American bases, Pearl Harbor, Manila, Wake Island, with eyes that held not triumph, but a profound, gnawing dread. He was Japan's sharpest naval mind, a gambler who understood odds better than any man in the empire, and he knew the truth that his superiors refused to face. War with the United States would awaken a sleeping giant, a colossus of industry and resolve that would crush the rising sun. Yet, as the drums of militarism beat louder, Yamamoto became the reluctant architect of the very catastrophe he predicted. Forced by duty and honor to plan the strike that would ignite the Pacific, he penned a letter to a friend with chilling foresight. "I can run wild for 6 months. After that, I have no expectation of success." The man who outsmarted empires was about to orchestrate history's most audacious gamble, knowing it would seal Japan's doom. Yamamoto was no warmonger. Born in 1884 as Isoroku Takano, the son of a samurai schoolteacher in Nagaoka, he had risen through the Imperial Japanese Navy on intellect and instinct, not blind loyalty. At the Naval Academy, he excelled in strategy, his mind a chessboard where moves unfolded years ahead. He lost 2 fingers at the Battle of Tsushima in 1905, a brutal clash with Russia that taught him the cost of underestimating a foe. Sent to America as a naval attaché in the 1920s, he studied at Harvard, drove across the country, and marveled at its factories, oil fields, and endless resources. "The United States is a nation of production," he wrote in his diary. "Japan cannot win a prolonged war against it." He gambled in Las Vegas, played poker with American officers, and learned their language, culture, and confidence. Yamamoto admired America, even as he served an empire bent on conquest. Back in Japan, he climbed the ranks, becoming Vice Minister of the Navy in 1936. He opposed the tripartite pact with Germany and Italy, warning that aligning with Hitler would drag Japan into a global firestorm. Militarists in the army plotted his assassination. He received death threats for advocating peace. "If we must fight," he argued in cabinet meetings, "strike decisively at the start. Then sue for peace before America mobilizes." But the Army's invasion of China in 1937, the embargo on oil and steel from the U.S., and the push into Indochina left no room for caution. Prime Minister Hideki Tojo and the Warhawks demanded action, seeing America as decadent, divided, its navy a paper tiger. Yamamoto, appointed commander of the Combined Fleet in 1939, was trapped: resign and be labeled a traitor, or plan the war he knew was suicidal. The stakes were apocalyptic. Japan's empire stretched from Manchuria to the Dutch East Indies, but its lifeline, oil from the Indies, was blocked by American sanctions. Without a knockout blow, the fleet would grind to a halt in months. Yamamoto's plan emerged from desperation: a surprise carrier strike on Pearl Harbor to cripple the U.S. Pacific Fleet, buy time to seize resources, and force negotiations. He drilled his aviators relentlessly, perfecting torpedo drops in shallow water, training for a dawn assault. "We must destroy their battleships in one strike," he told his staff, his voice steady, but his eyes betraying doubt. The operation was bold, unprecedented. 6 carriers, 350 planes, sailing 3,000 miles undetected. Success could delay America's response. Failure meant annihilation. Yet, Yamamoto's reluctance haunted every decision. He confided to aides, I fear all we have done is to awaken a sleeping giant and fill him with a terrible resolve. He knew America's shipyards could replace losses in years, while Japan's were already strained. He studied U.S. naval exercises, predicted carrier warfare's rise, and pushed for air power over battleships, a vision ahead of its time. But the Army dismissed his warnings, intoxicated by early victories in China. As tensions boiled, Yamamoto received orders: prepare for war or face court-martial. Honor bound him. He became the architect against his will. The world around him crackled with tension. In Washington, Roosevelt froze Japanese assets, demanding withdrawal from China. In Tokyo, fanatics chanted for glory, ignoring Yamamoto's memos. A war with America would be a disaster. He planned Pearl Harbor not for conquest, but survival, hoping a decisive blow would force peace. His pilots, young and eager, idolized him. They didn't see the storm he foresaw. As the task force assembled in Hitakapu Bay, Yamamoto addressed them. Strike hard, strike fast, but remember, this is not victory. The fleet sailed on November 26, 1941, radio silent, under overcast skies. Yamamoto stood on the bridge of his flagship Nagato, watching the horizon. He was 57, weary, his maimed hand a reminder of past wars. He played shogi to calm his mind, but sleep evaded him. Letters to his family revealed a man torn. "If I fail, forgive me." The stakes were Japan's fate: 6 months of wild running, then darkness. He outsmarted the empire's foes with genius, but couldn't outsmart its folly. The reluctant architect had built the plan that would ignite the Pacific, knowing it led to doom. As the carriers vanished into the north, Yamamoto whispered to the sea, "Let it be quick." The world held its breath. America slumbered, unaware of the storm approaching Hawaii. Japan teetered on glory or ruin. Yamamoto, the gambler who saw the cards stacked against him, had played his hand. The strike would come, the giant would awaken, and the Admiral's prophecy would unfold in fire and steel. Act 2. Pearl Harbor. Victory or trap? They believed their wolf packs ruled the seas, until the hunters became the hunted. But for Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, the true wolf was the war itself, and Pearl Harbor was the bait that would lure Japan into its jaws. As the Japanese task force sliced through the icy waters of the North Pacific in late November 1941, the world around Yamamoto churned with a fury of empires clashing. Japan's militarists, emboldened by conquests in China since 1937, had pushed south into French Indochina, seizing rubber plantations and rice fields to fuel their war machine. The United States, under President Franklin Roosevelt, responded with steel, an oil embargo in July 1941 that cut off 80% of Japan's fuel, a death sentence for the Navy's carriers and battleships. Scrap iron and aviation gasoline followed, strangling the empire's arteries. In Tokyo, Army generals raged for war, dreaming of a greater East Asia co-prosperity sphere free from Western dominance. Yamamoto, from his flagship Nagato in Hiroshima Bay, watched the madness unfold, his warnings ignored like whispers in a typhoon. The background was a powder keg. Japan's alliance with Nazi Germany via the Tripartite Pact in 1940 tied it to Hitler's rampage in Europe, where Blitzkrieg devoured nations. Britain fought alone after Dunkirk, its convoys battered in the Atlantic. America, isolationist but awakening, poured Lend-Lease aid to allies, its factories humming. Yamamoto, who had lived in Washington and seen Detroit's assembly lines, knew the numbers. Japan produced 400 aircraft a year. America could churn out thousands.
"We are David against Goliath," he told his chief of staff, Rear Admiral Matome Ugaki. But David had a sling. We have surprise. The plan crystallized. A lightning carrier strike on Pearl Harbor to neutralize the U.S. Pacific Fleet, seize the Dutch East Indies for oil, and fortify a defensive perimeter before America mobilized. Rising tension gripped the fleet. 6 carriers, Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, Hiryu, Zuikaku, and Zuikaku, gathered in secret at Tonkin Bay in the Kuriles, their decks loaded with 414 planes, 0 fighters, Val dive bombers, and Kate torpedo planes. Pilots trained in Kagoshima Bay, dropping modified torpedoes into shallow waters mimicking pearls. Commander Minoru Genda, the tactical genius, refined the waves, first fighters to strafe airfields, then bombers to sink battleships. Yamamoto demanded perfection, radio silence, refueling at sea in storms, a 3,700-mile voyage undetected. "One leak and we fail," he stressed, his maimed hand clenching. Spies in Hawaii reported the fleet at anchor on weekends. December 7th, a Sunday, was chosen. The world context amplified the stakes. Negotiations in Washington stalled. Ambassador Kichishaburo Nomura pleaded for peace, but Secretary of State Cordell Hull demanded withdrawal from China. Intercepted cables revealed Japan's deadline: war if no agreement by November 29th. Yamamoto's fleet sailed on the 26th, climbing ladders to carriers under cover of night. On Akagi's bridge, Vice Admiral Chuichi Nagumo, the strike force commander, paced nervously. "Yamamoto's gamble," he muttered. The admiral himself remained in Japan, directing via radio, his presence a ghost over the operation. Suspense built with every mile. Rough seas battered the ships, fuel low, but they pressed north to avoid shipping lanes. American reconnaissance missed them. Bad weather, overconfidence. On December 6th, the fleet turned south, launching position 230 miles north of Oahu. At 6 a.m. on the 7th, the first wave, 183 planes, roared off decks. Commander Mitsuo Fuchida led, radioing "Tora, Tora, Tora" at 7:49 a.m. Surprise achieved. The attack unfolded in chaos and precision. Zero strafed Wheelerfield, destroying planes on the ground. Torpedo planes skimmed the water, their weapons, adapted with wooden fins, slamming into battleships. USS Arizona exploded in a fireball, 1,177 men lost in seconds. Oklahoma capsized, West Virginia burned. Dive bombers hit Nevada, California. Smoke billowed, sailors leapt into oily waters, anti-aircraft fire sporadic. The second wave, 167 planes arrived at 8:59, pounding hangars and dry docks. In 90 minutes, 8 battleships damaged or sunk, 188 aircraft destroyed, 2,403 Americans dead. Tactical victory seemed absolute. Nagumo, elated, signaled Yamamoto, "Enemy fleet crippled." Pilots returned cheering. Losses light, 29 planes, 5 midget subs. Japan erupted in celebration. Tojo proclaimed glory. But Yamamoto, receiving the report aboard Nagato, sat silent. "We have won a battle, but awakened the giant," he said to Ugaki. The carriers, America's true strength, were at sea, unscathed. Oil tanks, repair yards, submarines untouched. He had begged for a third wave. Nagumo refused, fearing counterattack. The trap snapped shut. Roosevelt addressed Congress, a date which will live in infamy. America declared war, unified in rage. Shipyards accelerated, draft calls echoed. Yamamoto's 6 months began ticking. Japan seized Wake, Guam, and Philippines, but the U.S. fleet rebuilt. The Admiral's prophecy loomed: victory or trap. Pearl Harbor bought time, but at the cost of eternal enmity. The reluctant architect watched his masterpiece ignite the doom he foresaw, the Pacific aflame with a war Japan could not win.
Act 3. The Long Shadow of Midway. 6 months, that was Yamamoto's window, the fleeting span he predicted Japan could run wild before America's industrial fury engulfed them. By June 1942, the Pacific burned with Japanese conquests. Hong Kong fallen, Singapore humbled, the Philippines under the rising sun. Yamamoto's carriers roamed unchallenged, their planes bombing Darwin, raiding Ceylon. But in the Admiral's mind, a shadow lengthened, dark and inevitable. Midway Atoll, a speck in the Central Pacific, became the bait for his grand trap, to lure the U.S. carriers into decisive battle and destroy them. Codebreakers in Hawaii shattered the plan. American admirals Chester Nimitz and Raymond Spruance waited in ambush. The Battle of Midway unfolded as a cataclysm of fire and steel, where Yamamoto's genius met its fatal flaw. 4 carriers lost in hours, the cream of Japan's naval aviation obliterated. The long shadow of Midway fell across the empire, turning Yamamoto's prophecy into reality. The giant was awake, and Japan's doom had arrived. The conflict ignited from overconfidence. Yamamoto, aboard his new flagship Yamato, a behemoth of steel, planned Operation MI. Seize Midway, force the U.S. fleet to respond, annihilate it. His combined fleet was formidable. 8 carriers, 11 battleships, swarms of destroyers. But cracks showed. Fuel shortages from the oil embargo. Pilots stretched thin. Yamamoto divided forces. Aleutian's diversion, main strike on Midway. Spreading thin what should have been concentrated. "We must end this quickly," he urged Nagumo. But distance and radio silence hampered coordination. Yamato lagged 300 miles behind. Yamamoto isolated from the fight. American intelligence was the dagger. Station Hypo in Pearl Harbor, led by Commander Joseph Rochefort, cracked JN-25 naval code. Messages revealed Midway as the target, not San Francisco or Hawaii. Nimitz, trusting the decrypts, positioned Task Forces 16 and 17, carriers Enterprise, Hornet, and Yorktown, northeast of the atoll. Spruance commanded, Frank Jack Fletcher overall. "We know their plan," Nimitz told his staff. "Now we spring the trap." Repair crews patched Yorktown in days after Coral Sea damage, a miracle of American yards. Tension coiled as fleets converged. Japanese scouts flew from Midway on June 3rd, spotting nothing. Nagumo's carriers, Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, Hiryu, launched at dawn on the 4th, 108 planes bombing the atoll's defenses. Marines fought back, but damage was light. American torpedo bombers from Midway attacked first. Devastators, slow and vulnerable. Zeros slaughtered them, only 4 survived. Where are the carriers, Nagumo wondered, rearming planes for a second strike? The turning point exploded at 10:22 a.m. U.S. dive bombers from Enterprise and Yorktown, led by Clarence McCluskey and Maxwell Leslie, dove through clouds. Japanese decks were chaos, planes refueling, bombs stacked. Dauntless bombers plunged. 3 hits on Akagi in minutes, fires raging. Kaga took 4, exploding in infernos. Soryu burned from 3 strikes. "Abandon ship," captains ordered, crews leaping into shark-infested waters. Hiryu counterattacked, damaging Yorktown, but American planes found her by afternoon. 4 bombs, torpedoes. She sank at dawn on the 5th. Yamamoto, receiving frantic reports, ordered retreat. "The enemy carriers are destroyed," he demanded. No. Enterprise and Hornet unscathed. Yamato turned back, the Admiral's face ashen. "I am responsible," he said to Ugaki. 4 carriers gone, 248 planes lost,
3,057 men. Japan's elite pilots irreplaceable. America lost Yorktown, 1 destroyer, 150 planes, 307 men. But its carriers lived, factories ready to replace them. The battle's emotional toll was crushing. Japanese survivors clung to debris, watching Akagi's final plunge. A pilot from Hiryu rescued by a destroyer wept, "We were invincible!" Now, ghosts. Yamamoto, haunted, wrote in his diary, "Midway is the beginning of the end." His 6 months expired. America's shipyards roared, producing carriers Japan couldn't match. Midway was the conflict's heart, the moment Japan's momentum shattered. Yamamoto's trap became his grave. The long shadow engulfed the empire. The admiral who outsmarted foes had been outsmarted by code and courage, his doom sealed in flaming decks.
Act 4. Death of a Visionary. Operation Vengeance. The shadow of Midway stretched long and dark across the Pacific, swallowing Japan's early triumphs in a tide of irreversible defeat. By early 1943, Yamamoto's predicted 6 months of wild running had expired like a gambler's luck at dawn, and the empire paid the price in blood, steel, and shattered illusions. Guadalcanal, that jungle hell in the Solomons, became the first nail in the coffin. 6 months of savage fighting, where Japanese troops, cut off by American destroyers in the Tokyo Express, starved amid malaria and dysentery. Carriers lost at the Eastern Solomons in August 1942 and Santa Cruz in October left the fleet crippled, their air groups decimated. Pilots, the elite who had struck Pearl Harbor, fell in droves. Irreplaceable aces like Hiroyoshi Nishizawa, their skill honed over years, now fertilizer for coral islands. Yamamoto, aboard the super battleship Yamato, anchored in Truk Lagoon's turquoise waters, a fortress turned prison, paced the vast deck, his maimed hand gripping the rail until knuckles whitened. "We bleed from 1,000 cuts," he confided to his chief of staff, Matome Ugaki, his voice a gravel whisper over the hum of generators. "Every day the Americans grow stronger, their carriers birthing like demons from their yards." The consequences cascaded relentlessly. In the Aleutians, Japanese forces clung to Attu and Kiska, but American landings in May 1943 evicted them, a sideshow that drained resources. New Guinea saw General Douglas MacArthur's troops leapfrogging north, isolating Rabaul, Yamamoto's bastion. Supply convoys, once bold, now slunk under destroyer escort, torpedoed by U.S. submarines that prowled like wolves in reverse. Fuel shortages grounded planes. Admirals rationed oil for patrols. Yamamoto's letters home, smuggled past censors, grew desperate. "The war drags on longer than I feared. My heart is heavy with the weight of our young men lost." He flew inspection tours to rally spirits, boarding transports from Truk to Rabaul, his presence a fleeting spark for exhausted crews. In Bougainville's humid bases, he shook hands with pilots, their eyes hollow from constant sorties. "Fight with honor," he urged, but inwardly he mourned, "They die for a cause already lost." Japan's collapse was not just material, but moral. Tojo's government hid defeats behind propaganda, claiming strategic retreats, but whispers spread among officers. Yamamoto, the Navy's intellectual core, became a scapegoat in private. His Pearl Harbor victory now blamed for provoking the giant. Yet he pressed on, planning counteroffensives, knowing each was a delay of the inevitable. America's response was industrial apocalypse. Essex-class carriers launched every month, Grumman Hellcats rolling off lines to outfight Zeros. B-29 prototypes tested for Tokyo raids. Nimitz's fleet grew. Halsey's Third Fleet hammered the Marshalls. Yamamoto foresaw it all, his poker face cracking in private moments aboard Yamato, where he played shogi alone, moving pieces in futile patterns. The turning dagger came from intelligence. Station Hypo in Pearl Harbor,
Rochefort's team of crypto-analysts had deepened their grip on JN-25. On April 13, 1943, a routine intercept detailed Yamamoto's itinerary. Depart Rabaul at 6 a.m. on the 18th. 2 Mitsubishi G4M Betty bombers escorted by 6 Zeros. Land Belal at 8 a.m. for inspections. Times, altitudes, routes, all laid bare. The message reached Nimitz via secure cable. Target, Yamamoto. The Admiral hesitated. Assassinating a foe violated chivalry, but Roosevelt, briefed in the Oval Office, saw symbolic justice for Pearl Harbor. Get him, the President ordered. Knox approved Operation Vengeance, a surgical strike to decapitate Japan's naval brain. Planning was feverish, stakes high sky. From Guadalcanal's Henderson Field, 18 P-38 Lightnings, twin-engine killers with drop tanks for a 1,000-mile range, were selected. Major John Mitchell commanded, plotting the 435-mile leg to Bougainville at wave-top height to evade radar. 4 pilots formed the killer flight: Captains Thomas Lanphier, Rex Barber, Besby Holmes, and Raymond Henne. Briefed in a sweltering tent, map spread under lantern light, Mitchell drilled. Low and fast, hit the lead Betty, confirm kill, egress south. Pilots sweated the math. Fuel for intercept, combat, return, no margin. This is for our boys at Pearl Harbor, Lanphier said, his eyes fierce. Engines tested at dusk, mechanics worked through the night, drop tanks sealed against leaks. Dawn on April 18 broke humid and tense. Pilots strapped in at 7:10 a.m., 16 P-38s roaring skyward, 2 aborted with engine trouble. Mitchell led the cover flight high. The killer skimmed the sea, radios silent. Over 2 hours of flight, waves blurred below, fuel gauges dipping. At 9:34 a.m. near Kahili Airfield on Bougainville, the Japanese formation appeared. 2 Bettys droning at 4,500 feet, Zeros weaving lazy patterns above. Yamamoto, in the lead plane, reviewed reports, unaware death winged toward him. The attack erupted in thunder. Mitchell's cover engaged the Zeros, 50 cals chattering as fighters twisted in dogfights. Lanphier and Barber dove on the lead Betty. "I've got the bastard," Barber yelled, his burst shredding the right engine, wing igniting. The bomber nosed down, trailing smoke. Lanphier claimed hits on the fuselage, but Barber's fire was fatal. The plane spiraled into the jungle near Moila Point, exploding in a fireball that scarred the canopy. Yamamoto, ejected on impact, slumped against a tree, katana sword clutched, a single bullet wound to the head, dead before rescuers arrived. The second Betty, carrying Ugaki, crashed into the sea. Ugaki survived, wounded. Zeros pursued, downing Henne's P-38. He bailed, but vanished. The Americans egressed, fuel critical, and landed at Henderson with fumes. Confirmation came from ground search. Yamamoto's body identified by uniform, missing fingers, sword. Japan suppressed the news for a month, announcing lost in air operations on May 21 to avoid panic. In Tokyo, Tojo convened emergency meetings. Admirals wept in private. Ugaki's diary. The fleet has lost its soul. Darkness descends. Funerals were secret. Ashes interred at Tama Cemetery. Morale plummeted. Pilots flew with dread, whispering Yamamoto's curse. America erupted in quiet triumph. Roosevelt hinted at important intelligence in a press conference. Newspapers screamed, "Yamamoto dead." Pilots at Henderson toasted with warm beer. Payback for December 7th. The kill boosted resolve, avenging Pearl Harbor's 2,403 dead. Strategically, the void was catastrophic. Koga, Yamamoto's successor, was cautious, withdrawing to Palau, abandoning offensives. The Solomons fell completely by August. Marianas in July 1944. Saipan's loss opened Tokyo to B-29s. Without Yamamoto's carrier doctrine, Japan's navy became reactive, battleships idle. His death accelerated collapse. Leyte Gulf in October 1944 annihilated the fleet. Emotionally, it was a tragedy. Yamamoto, the reluctant genius, died as he lived, honor-bound to a doomed cause.
Act 5. Yamamoto's legacy and Japan's lost future. The flames that consumed Yamamoto's Betty bomber over Bougainville on April 18, 1943, did not just end a life. They ignited a legacy that burned through history, illuminating the folly of empire and the prescience of a man who saw doom in victory. Japan staggered onward for 2 more years, its navy a ghost fleet, islands falling like dominoes in a storm. Hiroshima and Nagasaki sealed the surrender in August 1945, Emperor Hirohito's voice crackling over radio. The war situation has developed not necessarily to Japan's advantage. Yamamoto's warnings, dismissed as cowardice in 1941, echoed in the rubble of Tokyo. 6 months of glory, then oblivion. His death marked the empire's lost future, a Japan that could have negotiated peace instead of total war, a Pacific spared atomic fire. The admiral who outsmarted foes left a blueprint for modern warfare, a cautionary tale of hubris and a bridge to Japan's rebirth as a pacifist power allied with the giant he awakened. The meaning unfolded in the war's grim finale. Without Yamamoto, Japan's strategy fractured. Koga died in a 1944 plane crash. Toyota at Leyte Gulf squandered the fleet in suicidal charges. Kamikazes rose from desperation, young pilots crashing into ships, a perversion of Yamamoto's precision strikes. Iwo Jima and Okinawa bled America white, but B-29s firebombed cities, LeMay's raids killing 100,000 in one Tokyo night. Yamamoto had begged for carrier dominance. Instead, battleships like Yamato sorted on one-way missions sunk off Okinawa in April 1945. His prophecy fulfilled. America's industry, 10 carriers in 1941, 100 by 1945. Overwhelmed. Japan surrendered aboard USS Missouri, MacArthur accepting on September 2. "We fought a war we could not win," a surviving admiral reflected. Yamamoto's words haunted the delegation. His legacy in warfare was profound, a visionary's gift to posterity. He pioneered carrier aviation when battleships ruled. Pearl Harbor proved air power supremacy, influencing Nimitz, Spruance, even Halsey. Post-war, the U.S. Navy built supercarriers on his model. Japan's Maritime Self-Defense Force studies his tactics. Yamamoto was 20 years ahead, a Pentagon analyst said in 1950s war games. He anticipated submarines and missiles, warning of prolonged wars. Cold War strategists cited him. Vietnam, Korea, avoid attrition against industrial giants. His poker analogy, strike hard, then negotiate, shaped deterrence theory. Emotionally, Yamamoto became Japan's tragic hero. Post-war, his family released letters. "I yield to no one in patriotism, but this war is madness." Films like The Eternal Zero portrayed him as reluctant sage. Schools teach his Harvard days, fostering U.S. ties. His foresight saved lives indirectly. Had Japan heeded him, no Pearl Harbor, perhaps no atomic bombs. The lost future haunted. A negotiated peace in 1942, Indochina independent, China spared escalation. Instead, 3 million Japanese dead, cities ash. Long-term impact reshaped nations. Japan's 1947 Constitution, Article 9 renouncing war, echoed Yamamoto's pacifism. He opposed militarists, admired America. U.S. occupation rebuilt Japan as ally. Today, bases in Yokosuka honor his old fleet. Bilateral ties thrive, trade, security pacts against China. Globally, his story warns autocrats. Putin in Ukraine, Xi in Taiwan, ignore industrial gaps at peril. Naval academies worldwide mandate Midway studies, intelligence, carriers, surprise. Yamamoto's meaning endures in quiet moments. At Nagaoka's memorial, visitors read his quote, "A war between Japan and America would be a calamity." His sword, recovered from the crash, rests in a museum, symbol of honor lost. The admiral who predicted doom left a future Japan embraced,
peaceful, prosperous, allied with the giant he awakened. His legacy is not conquest, but caution, the lost empire's gift to a world forever changed.